But sustainability, in my mind, I mean, we've been doing it for decades in U.S. food and agriculture. We call it conservation,
Mhm.
but it's taking it to that next level where we actually are measuring it, and we're able to communicate that to the ultimately to the end consumer and to society.
Welcome to the Feed Science Podcast. My name is Adam Farrenholz. I'll be your host today, coming to you from North Carolina State University's feed milling program and on behalf of Wisenetics. My guest today is Constance Cullman. Constance is the president and CEO of the American Feed Industry Association, AFIA. Welcome, Constance. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Adam. I'm looking forward to our chat.
You bet. So that's obviously your title and what you do now. But if you wouldn't mind, give the audience a bit of background on what your path has been to get you what you're doing here today.
Sure. Thanks, Adam. I think I just couldn't decide what I wanted to be when I grew up because I grew up on a farm and went to the Ohio State University, picked up a bachelor's and master's there and realized I didn't know enough. So I stayed around and I worked for OSU Extension in the economics department, did some livestock forecasting and a little bit of strategic planning, and then went off to work for farmers. So I've worked for the Farm Bureau system there, and then ended up at USDA. USDA is a big organization, and it took a while to figure it out. But I was the number 2 at the Foreign Agricultural Service, where having that experience with farmers and talking with stakeholders out in the state of Ohio was really helpful in representing the U.S. people at USDA as we negotiated with countries around the world. Went off and joined Dow AgriSciences as the head of U.S. government affairs, really trying to make sure that we had the tools and the innovation to really be able to produce for U.S. agriculture. So I went to the Farm Foundation to be able to just make sure that we could have some of those conversations across all parts of U.S. food and agriculture, but realized I missed the fight. I missed fighting for U.S. agriculture, wanted to do some more advocacy work. And having that experience with innovation and trying to get it to the marketplace, realized that the feed industry was a place to be because that's where so much of the innovation is happening. So came back and to Washington, D.C., and joined the American Feed Industry Association about 4.5 years ago.
Eastman serves veterinarians and nutritionists in agrochemical and animal health industries by helping them select, evaluate, and implement innovative nutritional programs. Eastman works with your team to customize your gut health approach in feed and water. Eastman's approach addresses nutritional and bacterial challenges and finds new ingredient preservation and hygiene solutions. Explore ways to accelerate and innovate your programs. Contact the animal nutrition team at eastman.com.
Excellent. All right. And if you wouldn't mind, I would imagine, we've got a number of folks that would listen or watch this on YouTube. And they, even if their companies are members of AFIA, they may not be fully aware of what the overall structure of AFIA,
Yes.
how you guys are structured with various different committees and groups, and the overall, kind of full mission of what the organization is. If you wouldn't mind, give everybody a bit of an idea of what that looks like as far as what AFIA does, and then how it's set up to do that.
Absolutely. I love talking about AFIA. So no hardship here, Adam. AFIA is one of the more unique trade associations in Washington, D.C. It has a very diverse membership. So when we look at the composition of our membership, we have everyone from feed and pet food manufacturers to ingredient suppliers. We have equipment manufacturers for those producing equipment for the feed industry. We have pharmaceutical companies, renderers, integrators, all part of our AFIA membership, which means that when the way we are structured is really important to hear from all of those members and understand what their needs and policy objectives are. So we have a robust committee structure, and that's where the real work and the real policy for AFIA happens. Those committees meet on a regular basis throughout the year. They give us insights into what's happening within the industry. More importantly, they help us identify some of the emerging issues that may be coming up that we really need to focus on. I tell my team it's great to look around the corner for our members, see what's coming next, and help us prepare them for that. So that is the heart of how we function. But we are privileged to have a 48 member board.
Mhm.
And if you can imagine, Adam, with that diverse a membership, we need a big board to make sure that we're hearing the voices that we need to be listening to. So that 48 member board oversees the policy, the strategic decision making for the organization. So our team is really structured to be able to facilitate those committee conversations and follow up on what those committees identify as important, all under the guidance of that strategic leadership board.
Yeah. And and then of course there's the in addition to all of the committees being set up
Mhm.
and the board and all of that is coming from membership and the companies that are part of that sending different folks. I've had the privilege of sitting as a university member on the production compliance committee
Mhm.
now for quite some time, and it's a really good opportunity to see what's going on. And I know we've got others doing similar things with other committees as well. But of course, then you have your own staff there at AFIA that
Yes.
is all associated with some of those committees and have their different roles as well. So, what does the staffing look like as far as how AFIA is structured that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a 22 member staff, and they are focused on several different areas where their expertise lies. Our legislative and regulatory team and our international team all are under our policy subject matter experts. And they're the ones who, for the most part, work directly with the committees. So they are, they're well versed on the industry, on the issues, and they help facilitate a lot of those committee discussions. We have a few folks who also, in other parts of the organization, also work with committees. We have a really excellent communications and meetings team, as well as a group dedicated to our membership development and making sure that we are making connections with our members. They also work with those committees. So, what happens is a staff person will be a liaison for that committee. We also try to put a board liaison on every committee so we have direct communication from those committees to the boards. But they will put together an agenda with the chair of the committee, and then they will go through those important issues. Now, the really exciting part is not only do we get policy and direction from those committees, but we get hard work from them as well. So they're not only helping us form policies, they're going to, some of them are going to the Hill and
Mhm.
helping us communicate that to members of Congress, or they're going with us to an administrator's office to talk to members of the administration, whether that's FDA, the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, or the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So those committees are not only our brain trust, but sometimes our workhorse.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned going up to the Hill and talking to
Yeah.
representatives and all that in the last 4 years or so since you've joined AFIA. What would you say are some of the real successes of what those efforts
Mhm.
have looked like as you've taken the board and as AFIA has gone and lobbied on behalf of the feed industry? What are some of those successes that have really been important as far as moving the feed industry forward from a regulatory or a policy type standpoint?
Yeah, well, too many examples to list them all, but I'll give you a few highlights of some things that have been successfully concluded and some that are in process, Adam. We had a problem with the Animal Plant Health Inspection Services certificate to export feed ingredients and feed products. And it was a kind of an interesting issue because the certificate on the very top of it declared that we were free of all sorts of animal diseases. Well, the problem was is that certificate was used for everything.
Mm,
So if you had a product that only had poultry in it, for example, and you had a product that was only pork ingredients and no other animal protein, if we when we got avian influenza, that certificate that said we were free of AI would have kept pork products out, just like it would have poultry products out of some of our export markets. So when we looked at African swine fever potentially coming to the United States, we thought, oh my gosh, if ASF comes and our certificate says we're free of ASF, it would have stopped everything
hmm
going out of the United States, whether it had pork product in it or not. So it was a huge problem, potential disaster on our horizon. We had our members and our board, our committee members and our board members go up on a couple of different instances to lobby Congress that APHIS needed to make those changes, lobbied APHIS, and we did get a change to that certificate. So we are now working with APHIS on an implementation, but it is a future disaster, potential disaster averted. Now we're still hoping that ASF stays out of the United States.
Yep.
We're working hard to make sure that that happens, of course, with our members and our partners. But it was a huge relief to know that that is no longer a threat looming over us, and that was all because of our members going up on the Hill and going to USDA. We also have a lot more attention and a lot more movement on the challenge of modernizing our regulations
Yep.
for feed
Absolutely.
ingredients. Yeah, you are probably very familiar with the Innovative Feed Act, and that act is designed to enable FDA Center for Vet Medicine to actually modernize and allow us to make label claims around feed ingredients. And so we have made a lot of progress in the last year plus. And all of that, I would say, all of that awareness was due to our members helping us get the attention of those in Congress. And now we're hoping to get that across the finish line this year, of course. But it all started with our policy leaders hearing the voices of our members. So that was amazing and an incredible success. And then I think the final one was, we are reliant on China for almost all of our vitamins.
hmm
There's other ingredients that are the same way that are becoming the very challenging amino acids. We have a huge percentage of those coming from China. And so that was a topic that our committee members and our board have discussed on the Hill. And we now have the attention of Congress on that. And it appeared in the supply chain legislation and enactment that's happening on the Hill. Vitamins were called out for feed ingredients, as well as getting the attention of the administration on it. So, just three examples. I could go on. We could fill the rest of our time together with them. But having the voice of our members come in makes all the difference in the world because they hear staff, but when they hear from their constituents, they hear from those driving the economy, they tend to pay a lot more attention.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's for sure. Once again, my guest today is Constance Cullman, AFIA's president and CEO. So if that's some of the successes that we've had, and as you mentioned, some of those are, I hope a lot of the folks that are listening or
Yeah.
watching understand how big a deal some of those things are. The Innovative Feed Act has the potential to significantly change things that we can do, bring us in line with some things that are done in other parts of the world with various different mitigant products and being able to control certain hazards as well as look towards sustainability and just get good ingredients to the market.
It allows us to compete, Adam, is what it
Absolutely.
does,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
Yep. That's absolutely right. It's interesting. It's a really interesting spot where we tend to look at ourselves versus at least some of our counterparts in, let's say, Europe or in Canada, and say,
Mhm.
thank goodness we're not regulated, to some of those levels, except for right there where it's, you all realize you're actually regulated at a higher level to where you don't have tools that they do have because of just some of that language that's always existed in the way that feed ingredients were done. And it's a long process, and it's been a slow grind to get there, but it seems like there's finally some really good movement on that. And I hope everybody understands how important that is and the value of the work of the trade associations and going after that. With those kind of successes in mind, what are the things that are either for sure coming,
Mhm.
from a regulatory and a policy perspective, that we know are coming and are going to have to be dealt with, maybe are working their way through being now talked about in government? And what are some of maybe the things that we think might be coming in the future that AFIA is gearing up to potentially have to go and fight on behalf of the feed industry for?
Sure. Yeah, no. Well, with the passage of the Innovative Feed Act, in the old world of lobbying and advocacy, you would have declared success and moved on. But we now know that the proof is in the details of how those laws are enacted. So we have a long road ahead of us in making sure that the regulatory, the implementing language that the Center for Vet Medicine puts together is as important as that legislation is. The legislation provides the environment for something to happen, but what happens still has to be guided and has to happen in conversation with the industry. So we have a long road ahead of us as Center for Vet Medicine puts together the implementing language and allows us to bring, as you mentioned, Adam. I mean, great points. The innovation, the techniques, the tools that will allow us to have better environmental profile, but more efficient production. Some of those production efficiencies, increase food safety. When we talk about where are consumers' concerns, we hear about sustainability, we hear about all of those other things, but first and foremost, they care about food safety. So if we have a feed ingredient that reduces salmonella shedding, we need to get that in the marketplace. And poultry operators need to know what those products do. If we have products that improve overall animal health and welfare, we need to get those things out there because that oftentimes, as you all know, translates directly into production gains. So that is going to be a long road ahead of us, and we're committed to that journey with the Center for Vet Medicine as they implement those laws. But sustainability, people talk about it a lot. And I get eye rolls sometimes because it's such a big concept. It's such a big word and it means something so different to so many people. But sustainability, in my mind, I mean, we've been doing it for decades in US food and agriculture. We call it conservation,
Mhm.
but it's taking it to that next level where we actually are measuring it and we're able to communicate that to the ultimately to the end consumer and to society. That's going to happen whether we're at the table or not. And it's as we've seen, in Europe, it's regulatory driven. Here in the US, it tends to be more market driven. But that doesn't mean that the government's going to stay out of it. So, right now, we are trying to have conversations not only with the government, but also with industry to make sure that if a sustainability initiative or if an initiative to track the climate gas emissions or the impact on water quality or the impact on biodiversity, if that becomes important to our customers, we want to make sure that they understand what really makes a difference when it comes to sustainability. Well, what are the measurements that really matter? So, Adam, you probably go into the grocery store and you see those absence labels, right?
Right.
Like
Yep.
GMO free or high fructose corn syrup free. Well, people are responding to those because they don't have anything else. They're trying to shop their values, right? I mean, when you go in, how do you look at those labels?
Right. Well, yeah. I, 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 I probably shouldn't say how I look at those labels.
Probably the same way I do.
Yeah, right. It's interesting. One of the things that I have looked at a lot more. We had a capstone course here in our NC State poultry science program that did a really interesting project looking at something like cage free and pasture raised eggs. And what they did was they looked at and they did some cool stuff where they um 3D printed some of the different structures and housing that would be used for that.
Mhm.
And then they'd put up all the statistics about how much feed it would take, how much water it would take, how much land it would take per dozen eggs, and could make a really, really good case for okay, you can be for cage free or you can be an environmentalist. You probably can't be both based on this kind of data. Um, and so I've started looking at a lot of those labels actually with trying to kind of put that scientific spin on it a little bit. And that's when I'll talk to people that will ask questions, whether it be family or friends or the random person I sit next to on an airplane. And instead of saying, oh, that's just a buzzword and it doesn't mean anything and it sounds that sounds biased or that sounds uncaring or something like that. Tried to look at it and say, well, let's think about it though. Why would we have gotten to this type of a production system? What does it give us that we didn't have before? So you can say you don't like GMOs. Okay, are you okay with cutting down more forests to grow crops? Are you okay with, we know water is a problem. Are you okay with using more water to grow crops, more
Mhm.
fertilizers to grow crops? Or does this GMO thing maybe kind of work? Not to mention point me to the science where it actually says that there's an issue. And so trying to frame those discussions a lot more in that there's a reason that agriculture proceeded in this way, and it's not just about, well, yeah, it's because everybody wanted to go get rich off whatever. It's sure there's a profit, but the profit all comes from efficiency. And as you said before, we've been working on being sustainable and efficient for a really long time. We just didn't always call it that specifically, but that's what we've been doing.
Exactly. And, that was a great example on cage free and things because that's what we're trying to avoid, right? We're trying to avoid um, uh, being told what we need to do to meet somebody's definition of sustainable that in many cases is the exact opposite. I mean, when they start talking about low growth chicken or slow growth chickens, it's like, oh my gosh, that's like the least sustainable thing we could possibly be doing is
Right.
slowing down how many days to market it takes for a chicken to get to consumers. So that, I mean, your points are that's exactly what we're trying to avoid. So we want to try to come up with a way to communicate to consumers something that actually means something. It's funny when you said you go in and you look at those labels. I do the same thing. I go in and I shop by sustainability and I shop by real sustainability and I shop by animal welfare. So, that means that I use the labels to decide what not to buy in
Yeah.
many cases. But most consumers are not as informed as you and I are. And so that's where we are trying to put together a way to talk about this and a way to do this and a way to prove it with metrics that makes a real difference to our overall impact on not just the planet, but also communities. And at the end of the day, our ability to grow as an industry. So that is a long-term challenge that we see, really coming at us, and one that is not going to be won overnight, if ever. Right? It's always going to
Yeah.
be a process. And then I think the other one is, my gosh, with the geopolitical turmoil we're seeing globally, we're really trying to figure out how we can improve the resiliency of the U.S. animal food industry to be able to pivot and function successfully in that changing geopolitical environment. The move from globalization to regionalization, what does it mean for our members? And that's a formidable challenge and task. So we're trying, what's the old adage? How do you eat an elephant? One bite
Hmm.
at a time.
Hmm.
Well, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out how do we start addressing where some of our supply chain vulnerabilities are. So we've put together an industry resiliency task force to look at dependence on single markets, single countries for some of our critical ingredients and supplies into the animal food sector, and then how do we nearshore or bring things back to the U.S., but more importantly, not just get some diversity in where we're sourcing some of these products. So that is a major initiative. Again, that's going to be a long-term challenge. We're going to identify milestones to let us know that we're getting there. But when we look big picture, those are some of the three biggest areas I think we have is making sure our domestic regulations are in line with where they need to be to foster growth, making sure that we're adapting to the sustainability piece that is going to manifest itself very differently over the next several decades. Today it's climate change. Tomorrow it could be biodiversity, right? So, and then the third is making sure that we're pivoted and positioned to be able to adapt to that changing global and trading environment.
Yep, absolutely. And I think what's really important for folks to understand about what AFIA does, what trade associations in general do, regardless of what industry we're in, is that ability to look at those higher level things, bring all those members together, and then maybe do some of the things that they can't do individually because they need to bring the collective voice together. Or in some cases, I think you're talking about the rules. It's a data collection, right? It's a
Mhm.
well, how are you experiencing this new rule and how the inspections are going? And how are you? And how are you? And how are you? Okay, we've now heard the same thing 15 times. Now we can go and we can have a conversation about what regulatory discretion there might be, because as you mentioned, the rules change, even if the text of the rule doesn't change, because there's always something. We talk about that with Food Safety Modernization Act with folks all the time of, look, even if the text of the rule doesn't change, how it is being actually enacted on the ground will change probably for the next couple decades. As, how, we never had thought about that before. How does this fit in? And so collecting that data and then doing that long-term education piece of the consumers, because the companies, we experience this a lot at the university as well, where stakeholders will come and say, "Hey, can't you go out and say these things on our behalf? We can't, because we've got a
Mhm.
market to keep." And also, we're looked at as biased when we say things, and then we usually throw our hands up and say, "Well, what do you think we are? Like, what do you think we get looked at? We get looked at the same way." But there's obviously a need for that, and it's sometimes difficult for the companies individually to do it, but the trade organizations can help package that message in a way that doesn't come off as self-serving when one company tries to do it.
Absolutely. You have honed in on something that we talk about as a team at AFIA, and that is we are here to take the bullets, right?
Right.
We are here to say, to bring up the tough issues. As having worked for a company and having worked in the trade association world both, I can tell you that a trade association that isn't willing to stand up and take those bullets and bring up those hard topics for its members is not doing its job. Because, and does that make our life challenging and uncomfortable? Sure. We don't have a brand to protect. I mean, we have an overall image for the industry to protect, and we do that just very, very strongly. But we don't have a brand to protect that has to function in the market, and we don't have products that are regulated. So we don't have to worry about the next product that we're bringing forward to that regulatory agency. So that's what we're here for. And we like to think of ourselves as an extension of our members' businesses, so that we're their DC voice, we're their ability to actually go in and have that access and have those relationships. So that is, you really, you're making me smile, Adam, because that's exactly my philosophy on this as well. And that's something that I think a lot of folks don't necessarily understand why associations are there, but we are here as your first line of defense.
Yep, absolutely. Before we get on to just a few closing questions, I also wanted to ask you if you would mind talking a little bit about the different programs that AFIA does in between, what you do at IPPE every year,
Yeah.
PISC, the EMC, Feed Industry Institute, all of those things. The education and kind of the outreach to the industry, what those some of those different programs are and what their purpose is.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Adam, we have four promises at AFIA, and we've touched on two of them already. To be your voice, to be members' voice in Washington, D.C., and to cover representation, to represent the industry. Our other two promises are expertise and engagement. And so we've talked about the team a little bit, the 22 members of the AFIA team that have all different kinds of expertise. We've got crisis communications expertise, we have regulatory expertise, we have international exporting and importing expertise. But we also have an incredible team of members or of staff members that focus on delivering content to members and giving them the opportunity to engage, not just with the organization, but with each other. So our events are really are designed around that. So you mentioned IPPE, my favorite event of the year. We join our partners, the Meat Institute and U.S. Poultry and Egg down in Atlanta every January. We fill the Georgia World Congress Center. I mean, it's packed down there. This year, we had almost all the floor space taken up, and we had 31,000 people come in. I call it the biggest party with 31,000 of my friends that I could host, right? But we at that event, there's the trade show, and it's so exciting to see the business getting done at IPPE on the trade show floor. There are companies that have whole buildings, many buildings built inside the buildings with office rooms and meeting rooms. And then we also have a lot of education programs. So we will talk about this past year of feeding your ESG. So we talked about sustainability earlier. We had a session with APHIS. We had sessions on feed regulatory, and it's really exciting to be able to offer the expertise and allow members to engage with one another, learn from one another, but then also learn from the experts we bring in. Our next big event is our Purchasing Ingredient Suppliers Conference. And I think of this almost as a mini IPPE. It's smaller. This year, we've got, at least right now, over 500 people scheduled to join us at our March event down in San Antonio. And that is a place where people also do business. So there's a lot of business happening. It's the only time I don't get upset about seeing backsides in seats in the
Hmm.
education sessions, because if they're not in the education sessions, they're off doing business. But we also provide some great resources for people to come in and network, and we try to do a few fun things so people meet new potential customers or buyers within the industry. Have you been to PISC before, Adam?
Yeah, so I've not. I think one time I had the opportunity to stay for a little while. I usually do go down because of, as I mentioned before, the production compliance committee usually meeting during PISC and during EMC, then in the fall. And so
Mhm.
I'm usually around at least to see a little bit of it. I haven't gotten to stay for the whole thing, I think, other than maybe one time.
Well, we'd love to have you come back because it's an exciting meeting. We also have a few meetings that are designed to target certain members or certain parts of our membership, and one is the Liquid Feed Symposium that is held in September every year. And that is a great event for people to come together that's more education focused, and they really like to be challenged with what's coming at them. Um, and then, of course, you mentioned EMC, our Equipment Manufacturers Conference, which happens in early November. And they have a lot of networking opportunities as well as some educational programs, but it allows them to really get together with their peers and talk about what's happening in the equipment manufacturing world. And then, of course, we have some big education programs. We have our Feed Industry Institute, which is held every other year. We have our PCQI training
Mhm.
that happens, and we thought that might slow down, but what we learned is that people need that information. So we've got a great team in Gary Huddleston and Paul Davis that go out and really work with members to understand those regulations and what they need to be doing with that. And then, of course, we have ongoing webinars. We have our KSU partner courses, 500 AFIA KSU 500 courses that can be on demand or also in a scheduled program so they can meet some other folks.
Yep.
But it's just, throughout the year, we try to provide opportunities for our members to get information and meet each other.
Absolutely. So lots of opportunities, kind of no matter where folks find themselves in the industry to, as you said,
Absolutely.
get out and meet each other and get some good information.
It's time for our famous three.
So to wrap us up, one of the things we like to do when we have guests on is ask just a few questions at the end. One kind of related to the purpose of the Feed Science podcast, and then the other two are kind of more of a kind of a general set of questions. So we'll start with the first one, and that would be, what resources have you found to be particularly valuable for folks as far as learning about the feed industry, staying current with the feed industry? This could be, a weekly newsletter or a particular website or a particular even social media feed. We've had some people bring up over
Mhm.
times of, this is something I'm always paying attention to keep me informed and keep me educated about what's going on.
Well, if you're a member, our Feedgram that comes out once a week is the go-to email to take a quick look at. If you're not looking at it and you're a member of AFIA, make sure you put that on your to-do list every week because it will hit in a very brief, succinct way with links if you need more information about what's happening from a policy standpoint, from an industry standpoint. That is probably one of the most useful tools we have that come out on a regular basis, and one that I would really highly recommend people look at. If you're a non-member, one, you're more than welcome to join, and we can take your membership anytime, Adam. But we also I put out a blog. And, when I first came on board at AFIA 4.5 years ago, Victoria Brem on our team was pitching the idea of a blog. And I went, oh my gosh, writing blogs can be so tough and things like that. And she sometimes still has to hound me to get my blogs written. But they are incredible because sometimes they're light, sometimes they're very, very substantive. But they are quick reads, and they're kind of an engaging, quick way to get a download on a particular issue. So a lot of them are evergreen. If you take a look at our website, you can go and look at blogs all the way back for 4 years, but others are very, very timely. So that is something that it's just an easy way. And we also have the translation, so you can, if you want to listen to the blogs instead, you can listen to them rather than reading them. So those are two things I would say, just right off the top of my head, are very, very helpful. Of course, we have the Institute for Feed Education and Research, which is our foundation. And we also have a wonderful newsletter and series of blogs that are coming out from iFeeder, usually more focused on sustainability, but there's other research and education topics that are touched on. And those are really, really valuable if you want to dive in on sustainability, just to kind of get a feel for what's happening in that area. And if you want to really dive in on sustainability and how do I tackle it for my company, the iFeeder Sustainability Toolkit is a great tool for folks to figure out what their sustainability journey, how it can advance or how it can start.
Sure, absolutely. Um, so for you, as you have kind of worked through your professional career, Do you
Mhm.
have any suggestions of things that have been particularly impactful for you? We've had a lot of people mention, a particular book or a particular training program that they completed or something like that, that would be beneficial to anybody that's in a professional environment, management environment, that is trying to get better at managing people, managing time, managing resources, whatever the case may be. Has there been anything that you have found particularly impactful that you would want to share with folks?
Well, one that is more recent is, and I like to go to recent books, but there's
Hmm.
always, 5 Minute Manager, those types of books. Those are staple. But one that I read more recently, and we actually used it with our team for some professional development, was Leading Without Authority. And there's a lot in there, and you kind of have to filter through it a bit. But it really talks about the importance of teamwork, of finding out how do you work with people to not only help yourself but help them as well, but more importantly, make for a stronger organization. And when you have a team of 20 some people or 200 people or 2,000 people, you get the most out of people when they collaborate, when you get that synergy of great ideas coming together and creating truly spectacular ideas. So that's one that I would recommend. I'm not going to lie, there's a bit of hubris in that book, but there's some great lessons in it and some great ideas and things to kind of spark your imagination and get you energized to do some things. And then, I never ever want to underestimate the idea of a mentor or a coach or someone to help you realize your best strengths. And how do you capitalize on those best strengths to be a truly outstanding professional and leader?
Yep, that's a great suggestion. I think that's something that we could all probably formalize a little bit more,
Yeah.
in the way that we do things. So the last question, then, kind of leading right into that, is with the folks that you work with, and you obviously, because of your board, and there's a lot of folks that are going to be coming onto that are also presidents and CEOs and owners of companies and all kinds of things like that. You get to be around a lot of folks that have been very successful in their careers.
Mhm.
And what are the things that you see in people that have kind of gotten to that point in their career that they all seem to share? If you had to pick a trait or two that they all seem to do this or have this perspective, and that really has stuck out to you as something that is something maybe we should all aspire to try to do a little bit better if we want to also be successful like that.
Yeah, they listen, Adam. They listen more than they talk. That is probably the thing that has struck me over the years, as I start talking right now instead of listening to you. But they listen more than they talk, and they really are curious. They know they don't know everything, but they take the experience. They listen. They're constantly learning, and they don't have and they're humble. Those are the ones that are truly the ones that are the individuals that stand out and I see are the most successful. And because they're humble and because they listen, it's very obvious they value their team. They
Mhm.
value the people they're working with. And that's what struck me the most and what I try to emulate.
I think yeah, I love that answer. It's a great answer. Okay, well, thank you very much. My guest today has been Constance Cullman, President and CEO of AFIA. Constance, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
You bet, mine as well. For the Feed Science Podcast, I'm Adam Pernols from North Carolina State University on behalf of Wise and Ethics. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.